the Stochastic NFL Tournament Strategy Show. New look this week. Greg Ehrenberg out this week. It is Mrs. Ehrenberg's birthday, so Greg, being the good son that he is out celebrating with his mom. I'm hosting this week. Neil Orfield here. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS, and the new analyst this week is Matthew Belman. You can find him on Twitter at Fantasy Tips Matt. I know Matthew Belman has already got at least one ticket to the NFL Live Final on DraftKings, so he's been having a pretty good season so far. Hopefully, he can find us some nuggets here. Matt, how you doing?
Doing pretty well, man. Really pumped to be on here with you. It's been you were saying like a month since we've gotten on a vid together, so pumped for this. This is a show I usually watch, so happy to be on it, spewing some advice.
Yeah, Matt and I did plenty of baseball shows. I think this is our first ever NFL show together, so happy to be talking some NFL with you this week. I like this. Marty Connor says, "My God, Stochastic, did you need to use the Kelsey picture?" Yeah, I think people are getting some Travis Kelsey fatigue out there, but it's good for marketing, right? Like the NFL has been crushing it with the Kelsey Taylor Swift thing going on. By the way, if you have not already hit that like button, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel. That really would help us out a lot. We're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. We're over 90. I think we're over 91,000 at this point. So we're getting close there, but we need some support. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. This show is going to be sponsored by DraftKings Rainmakers. Fantastic product. We'll talk about Rainmakers a little bit more later on. All right. So you watch this show regularly, so I guess you know the format, Belman.
Yeah, I pretty much know the format.
Okay. I mean, we're just going to go position by position. It is pretty straightforward. We'll start by talking some quarterbacks, and we should get biases out of the way early on, Belman. I know that you're a big Browns fan. Is that going to affect your analysis this week?
No, not at all. I mean, we don't even know if Watson's playing on Sunday, tomorrow. I know they just called up TJ Walker from the practice squad, so we'll see what happens there. Watson apparently looked good in practice yesterday, but no, that's not going to affect me at all, nor should it really ever.
No, of course it shouldn't. I'm making a joke. I know you're a professional. You're not going to let your biases affect the way you approach us.
I'm also just like on that note, I liked the Browns offense coming into the year with a healthy Watson, etc. Starting to think that even if the offense comes together, like not going to be a team I want all that much of usually because their D is so good. That's true. I think they're going to be a running team as much as they can be, I'll say.
That's something that I've started to think about more. Like if I don't factor that in enough in like best ball or like weekly winners types of contests on Underdog, that kind of thing, like or DraftKings, should we be factoring in like the team's defense more when thinking about how to approach their offense? And that's something that I think I'm gonna have to think about a little bit more going into next year. If that's like, do I really want to be of course, if we're avoiding players on teams with great defenses, we would have avoided the Niners this year, and that would have been a big mistake. But I mean, I guess you would have thought probably Christian McCaffrey would have wanted anyway with a good defense. Often a good defense pairs with a good running back. So I don't know, something we'll think about.
I think there's many sides of that coin, just because when you have a really good defense, your offense has the ball more naturally because your defense is getting stops. I don't think it's something that like I'm putting in practice for tomorrow, just something that's kind of in the back of my mind. But yeah, I'm hyped to talk this slate with you.
Yeah. Can you hear my dog going crazy?
No.
Okay, good. He's going. My wife just came home with her parents, and whenever we have guests, he goes crazy. I can hear him going crazy, but glad to hear that you can't. All right, let's talk some quarterbacks, and we'll start at the high end of the pricing range, and then we'll move down to the mid range, the cheaper quarterbacks. At the high end, we have Mahomes, of course, is the most expensive quarterback on the slate, $8,300, going up against the Chargers. Great spot for Mahomes. We got Josh Allen at $8,200 against the Patriots. Justin Herbert also in that game with the Chiefs at $8,000. Kind of a break off after that, but we'll include let's include Lamar Jackson, 7,600 in this group as well. Of the high end, Lamar Jackson and higher quarterbacks, who do you like? Who are you fading? What do you think of? Do you think you're going to be playing in the high end much?
I would like to be playing in the high end a lot, but the big problem I have with Mahomes and Herbert, who I like a lot, those are probably my two favorite quarterbacks on the slate. Their weapons are real expensive, not just, priced up for who they are. But if you want to build Mahomes, Kelsey, Keenan Allen, Eckler lineup, like good luck. I don't even know if you can fit it. If you can, you're punting everywhere else. So it kind of brings an interesting dynamic into this slate. I think that Mahomes looks really good. He's first in ownership this week. It's pretty flat, but he's projected to be the highest owned QB. Herbert is projected for basically no ownership. I like both of them here. I like that game a lot. If you can find a way to make it work and maybe fade one of those high-priced stars, I think that either one of those QBs looks really good. Mahomes probably has a safer floor. He's shown that all year. Herbert's a guy, he didn't play particularly well against Dallas, still had a decent DFS score. We know his upside on any given day. So I like both of those quarterbacks there. Those are my two favorite high-priced guys. How do you see the expensive range?
So I see it similarly, but not exactly the same. So I love Mahomes here. Obviously a great spot against the Chargers. Will be interesting. I'll have to look closer at the Chiefs receivers, how they worked out last week. But you with Mahomes, it's like, you can always pair him with Kelsey. That it's been a little bit tough with the receivers. We'll talk about the receivers a little bit more for the Chiefs, potentially when we get to the receivers. But yeah, love Mahomes. I actually really like Josh Allen too. So I think I like Allen actually maybe even better than Justin Herbert here. In part because you can pair him with low-owned Gabe Davis is kind of interesting. I also really like Stephon Diggs this week. So I know it's not like typically a matchup that you want to target against the Patriots defense, but they are pretty banged up. I kind of see this Buffalo offense as being one that, is going a little bit overlooked here. We have a low-owned Josh Allen. We have 3.1% projected ownership for Josh Allen against this New England Patriots defense. I actually have a ton of interest in the Bills here in a, kind of a little bit of a growth spot, but I still think it could work out. Lamar Jackson.
The interesting thing is about Allen and Herbert, our tools do not like either of them. Like you look at the boom bust tool, they're both much lower than you normally see, especially Josh Allen. Well, both of them. I mean, they're two of the bottom QBs in that tool. So it's just interesting to see that. It's because of their price. The boom bust tool actually loves the Patriots D, which we'll get to obviously towards the end of the show. I get your Allen point though, coming off pretty much a stinker last Sunday night. Now he's facing a Patriots defense that, was okay last week against the Raiders and Brian Hoyer, but had gotten lit up the 2 weeks before that. So I think it's an interesting call out. I like Allen and Lamar pretty similarly, just in that, you can always make a case for those guys. Those are the type of guys that you could play on any given week. And in any game script, they can get there just because of their rushing upside. Yeah.
So it's interesting. So I look at Josh Allen and you say the tools don't love him, but looking at the boom bust. So let's break it down. 3.6% projected ownership, only a 0.9% chance of booming, which I think is what you're referring to.
Right. He has leverage.
Yeah. So booming is like a value score based on how many fantasy points you put up relative to your salary. But on this slate, I think, as you can see in the tool, so he has a 4.9% chance of being optimal and only a 0.9% chance of booming. What that is telling me is this is an ugly slate where we might not have any quarterbacks really boom. So Josh Allen doesn't necessarily need to hit his boom score to be optimal, I think, because we have better odds of him being optimal than hitting his boom score. So I don't know, I guess from one perspective,
very fair point.
Tools. And then we also have in the top stacks tool, we have Buffalo looks decent. So we have Josh Allen, as I said, 3.6% ownership, whatever it is, 7.3% chance of the Bills being the top stack, only a 3.3% chance of being the top value stack. But I still think that's, there's a lot of ways to look at it where it's negative in some senses, but also you can make a bull case also looking at the tools. For
me, it's a classic case, and I love that breakdown you just made. You're right here. It's a classic case of spend up to be contrarian with Josh Allen, who's expensive. And then the pass catcher that you probably want with him, who has killed the Patriots, is Stephon Diggs, who also isn't going to get as much love because this game isn't going to get a ton of love. So I think your points are really well taken. On the surface, it might look like he's too expensive, but when you put it in a vacuum and you look at this entire slate and the fact that his optimal percentage is so much higher, I like that call a lot. I think it's a great tournament play.
Nice. All right. Glad we're on the same page there. I see a lot of chat about Devontae Adams in the chat. We'll talk about Devontae Adams when we get to wide receivers. And then the only other expensive quarterback that we haven't even talked about is Lamar Jackson, who it's funny, the first show that we did on the channel this week was the first look with Ben Rossa and Laffy. And they came in, that was before we had ownership protections. They were like, I think Lamar Jackson is going to be a really nice contrarian option, really tough spot against that Detroit defense. But Lamar Jackson is kind of his own thing, having the ability to run as much as he does and pass. He is coming in at 7.5% ownership, and I think those Baltimore guys in general getting more ownership than they were anticipating, than I would have anticipated before we got ownership projections, but still looks okay. 7.5% projected ownership, 8% chance of being optimal. I prefer, as I said, I think I prefer probably Mahomes number one. It's between Mahomes and Allen for me, number one. And then after those two, it's close for me. Then it's a kind of a second tier for me with Herbert and Lamar Jackson. Probably I'd take Herbert before Lamar Jackson. But that is kind of close with those expensive guys. Anything else you want to say on the high end, or should we move down to the mid-range at quarterback?
Not really. I think Lamar is a classic. He's Lamar Jackson, can do it in any type of game script, as I mentioned. The Detroit D, though, has been good. So I don't think it sets up as like an amazing spot on paper. I don't think that Detroit is a world-beating defense, but this game is one of the more intriguing ones of the week.
Okezzie points out Detroit struggles versus tight end. So yeah, that does make the Lamar Jackson stack in particular. You can just do Jackson with Adams a little bit more interesting. Yeah, Andrews and Lamar Jackson. All right, let's move down to the mid-range. So the top of the mid-range is we have Stafford at 6,500. Just not getting a ton of ownership for Stafford. We've got Goff there, Geno Smith. Let's talk Stafford all the way down to. Let's go down to Jordan Love in this range. So we have Jordan Love, we've got Geno Smith, we've got Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford. Who do you like in this range? Who do you think you're going to play? Who do you think you're fading here?
So I'm not sure I'm going to play much in the mid-range because I like the top guys a lot. And if I don't spend all the way up, I think there's a few cheaper guys I'm intrigued in, interested to talk about with you, so forth. As far as this range goes, though, for my money, Stafford looks really good. He's, LA has a 12% chance to be in the top stack. He's only getting 6% ownership, a lot of value there. The problem is that the weapons you want, specifically Cooper Kupp, is also very expensive. He's another guy I really like on this slate, though. So I like Stafford here. If you can find a way to get him and, Kupp, I think it makes a lot of sense. Not sure I love much from the Pittsburgh side to run it back, especially with Deontay Johnson back. So that might be an issue. And the other one that I'm looking at here is Jordan Love. He hasn't been very good this year, but he's been good from a fantasy perspective, or at least good enough. Now he faces this Denver defense. This is one where they only have a 3% chance to be in the top stack, 5% ownership, a little bit negative leverage, but they're so cheap. They're booming in our tools because of that. Like, you've got a cheap Luke Musgrave to pair with him. He's cheap himself. He's got rushing equity. So, in cash games, I know this is a tournament show, but I think Love is definitely a guy you can look at. And in tournaments, I think that this could be an upside week for him, especially off the bye against this defense. Sounds like you like Love here.
Yeah, so I have some interest in like a lot of these mid-range plays. So Stafford, as you laid out, Stafford looks good. Like, it's a little bit tough because the options you really want to pair him with that wide receiver are pretty expensive. Generally, it's going to be Cooper Kupp is looking the best, but then Puka Nacua I do think is interesting. Save a little bit of salary. I still think Puka Nacua is somebody that is going to have big spike weeks here and there. So I think you could, and then even Tutu Atwell I think is a viable pairing with Stafford. So I have some interest in Stafford. Don't think I'm going to Jared Goff here. They do have, kind of interesting with Amon-Ra Laporta. Like, you do have a pretty narrow tree to some extent with Jared Goff, but I think that he's the one that I'm probably not going to focus on. Geno Smith, even against Arizona, like, I think that is kind of interesting. I didn't see if we get an update on DK Metcalf this morning, but it looked like he was like pretty questionable. Like, we're not sure if DK Metcalf is going to play. I think it's going to make me like Geno even more if DK Metcalf doesn't play, because it just narrows down the tree to then you're playing Tyler Lockett and JSN most likely. So I think I have some interest in Geno Smith against that Arizona defense. And then Jordan Love, as you laid out, like, yeah, he has not been great as an NFL quarterback. Love to see it as a Vikings fan that he is not just the next great thing in Green Bay. But yeah. He's not exactly right. Yeah, he's not yet. But yeah, 5,800 against that Broncos defense that has been, I mean, they did better against the Chiefs than I think anybody really imagined they would. But still, I think more games than not, they've had just broken plays throughout the game, and the team's taken advantage of it.
I view like the Giants and the Broncos like similar. Yeah, they played decent in their last game in prime time against really good teams, but that doesn't mean they're going to play like that every week. So very skeptical on like Denver's defense going forward, especially with a fire sale potentially going on there. I think that based on price, the Packers, specifically Jordan Love, look good here. Yeah, and Geno Smith, he's getting ownership. All the Seattle guys are getting ownership. They're too cheap for the spot they're in. They all stand out. And I'm with you. If Metcalf is out, just means that Lockett, becomes like a clear wide receiver one. You've got JSN who becomes in play now. So I'm with you. Like, I don't know if I like him more if Metcalf's out, but I see there are reasons to like him more.
Yeah. It's at least it's interesting as a play. Yeah, it condenses a little
it's
bit.
Almost like,
I hear you.
You know what it's like? Like an expensive baseball lineup, like who's very expensive. Like it's like the Braves if Matt Olson's not in the lineup. Like you like them better because they're easier to fit, but Olson's really good.
Right. It also hurts the odds that they're going to just completely go off. Yeah, exactly right. Like there are pros and cons to DK Metcalf potentially being out for that stack. Somebody in chat brought up the squid chop. Are you familiar with the squid chop?
I'm not.
Okay, we on the Wednesday ownership show, Lofty was introducing me to the fact that you can kill a squid just by like karate chopping it, like between like basically on its neck area. I don't know if you call it a neck on a squid, but like right below the head. Like, and I think we actually showed a video on the ownership show, but it's they show like the squid is like it's like reddish color. Guy karate chops it, and it immediately turns white when it dies. Like goes completely white throughout his body. Really fascinating, but not something we need to go over again on the show. We went over it on the Wednesday ownership show. If you want to check it out, just like
I'm more interested how it came up.
I have no idea how it came. I think Lofty just like thinks of weird things like all day, every day. He's just a weird guy. No, I forget how it came up exactly, but Lofty brought it because I didn't know about this concept prior to Lofty introducing me to it, but it is really, really fascinating. Greg says, I'm not entirely sure that the squid is not just unconscious. Yeah, honestly, I'm not sure that. I watched one video on it and it is pretty nuts. If you want to see it, you can just Google like squid chop. Probably would do it. Mateus says it's Lofty. That's how. Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, we'll move down in six. So it sounds like you have a lot of interest in some of the cheaper guys here. I don't know if I'm going to follow you. I think I'm going to be playing largely in the high and mid range. I will say the high end. I could have cut it off at I don't know, maybe the high end of the cheap, the higher priced cheap guys, the guys that we haven't talked yet. I do have some. I don't think I'm going all the way cheap, but like Daniel Jones is sort of interesting. Sam Howell is sort of interesting. Who do you like of the below Jordan Love at 5,800? Who do you like below Jordan Love in pricing?
So like is a relative word.
Yeah.
It's really a product of other players on this slate that I like a lot that are very expensive. Our tools don't love him. Projection sites don't love him. But I think it's a case of like the unknown here. Tyson Bagent. So I love the spot at home against the Raiders. I know that Max Crosby gets a ton of pub, but this is not a good defense. They've had a really easy schedule recently. Sorry, Jacob, I don't know if you're a Raiders fan. Sorry back there, but their D is not good. They're coming on the road here. The Raiders are 2.5 point favorites here, only giving 2.5 against a undrafted rookie quarterback from Division II. So everyone is on the Raiders. I really like the Bears in this game. And if you play Bagent under 5K and he gets you 17 DK points, I think you're set up really nicely. Now, again, that's no guarantee. I'm not too familiar with his college game, etc. I will say, though, there's a reason that he won this job. They ended up cutting PJ Walker, who had guaranteed money in his contract that they signed, for him to be the backup. He was decent in relief last time out. Now they have a week of preparing him. I think that he's got easy weapons to pair with if you want to do that. I don't think you have to do that just because of how cheap he is. And I think this is just a classic case of the unknown here. Like, I don't know how projection systems can really project him based on what we know about him, based on his history, etc. We just haven't seen this in the league too often. So that alone intrigues me. Of course, he's getting no ownership. If he were getting ownership, I'd completely be off him here, but he's not. I don't think people want to take the chance here. And I'm looking to like win $1 million, right? Like you got to take risks. There's really expensive pieces I like in that Kansas City game. As I mentioned, you cannot play Eckler, Keenan Allen, Kelsey, and Herbert or Mahomes, but you can play them with Tyson Bagent. So if he gets you a score that's at least reasonable, I think you're, like I said, in good standing. Also, just one other note. I don't know how much I take this into consideration, but it's not a bad thing. His dad is like a 28-time arm wrestling champ comes with, a lot of moxie. So got to believe he passed that down a little bit, right?
I love that nugget. I did not know that about Tyson Bagent. That is maybe a really strong arm. It's funny because this is we talk about this as kind of an ugly slate, like not many spots stand out. But the reason that I don't think I'm going to get there necessarily, and maybe I'll reconsider, but I feel like I like a lot of other ugly spots. So it's weird. Like I like so many spots on this slate, even though it is sort of an ugly slate. We already talked about several of those kind of mid-range, upper end guys that I like. But then also, as I said, like Daniel Jones is sort of interesting to me. So like, I get it with Tyson Bagent. I actually think that you make a really good point there. Maybe he is somebody that I should consider. Maybe I will consider Badge. I don't think I'm going to Hoyer here, even though he's also got in a pretty good spot against that Bears defense. But I can see with Badger. Like we just don't really know exactly what to expect with him at an NFL level. He's 4,900. We have him at 1.4% ownership. So maybe I'll consider it just a little bit there.
I see Brian Hoyer getting like 4%. No thanks. We know who Brian Hoyer is. Yeah, even in a game they won last week, like he didn't have a good score. I just don't think that he's a viable DFS quarterback. Now, Badgett might be worse than him, but we don't know. And like I said, trying to win tournaments here. And I think that the point you made about how you like a lot of the ugly spots, I think that comes down to a simple beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Like it might not be as ugly to you because you like them. Also, once the slate starts, you can throw that all out the window. Who cares what we thought it was going to be before then? Maybe it's the most beautiful slate we've ever seen. Who knows?
Right. Yeah, it's very Colin Owens says the problem with Bagent is you can easily run on the Raiders and they will be run heavy. Yeah, that is part of it. And we saw that. We saw that in the last game after Bagent came in. When Fields left, they just started running it a lot more with Deontay Foreman. So who knows? Like that could have been just like you don't want to use the rookie who has not been prepared to play in this game. It could be different when he is actually like had a week as like you're going to be the starting quarterback. It's a little bit of a different situation.
If they're moving the ball on the ground, I'm happy with that. First off, I love Foreman. So I like Foreman probably even more than Bagent. So setting that aside, though, like if they're moving the ball and staying on the field, I'm very happy for Bagent there. At 4.9K, you don't need that much. So, yeah, I'm totally fine with the fact that they supposedly could or, should run on the Raiders. That only helps in my mind.
Yeah, no, that is a good point there. The other so like the high end of the cheap guys, and I kind of drew an arbitrary line here, but we did not talk about Daniel Jones. He was the top of the cheap guys for me. It's an interesting spot against the Commanders. Like I think that I will have some interest in Daniel Jones. It's like if he can get the ball out, that Commanders secondary is so bad. So I feel like there is like big play potential there for Daniel Jones. The question is just like, can the Giants offensive line stop Daniel Jones from being sacked 10 times? And I'm not confident that they can, but like, I still think that I'm willing to take some shots there just because that Washington secondary is so bad. They've given up so many big plays. I don't know. What do you think? Do you have any interest in Daniel Jones against that Washington defense?
Great talking point. So a few things I have on my mind here. One, that Washington secondary has been awful, but they played better last week after benching Emmanuel Forbes, who got toasted in the first month of the season, especially on Thursday, correlated in that Thursday Night Football DJ Moore game where he just went absolutely nuts. Yeah. The Giants are interesting here, all of them. Jones, the receivers, and Barkley. Barkley's really the only expensive one. You mentioned the Chiefs a little bit ago on when we were talking about their wide receivers. The Giants and Chiefs wide receiver rotation has been similar. We've seen where they're kind of rotating 6, 7 deep. The difference is that last week, the Giants didn't do that. Darius Slayton ran one of his highest, plays of his career. Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, those guys are established in their roles now, which makes me like Daniel Jones that much more. He's a guy you can certainly play on his own because he's got rushing upside. We saw it in that Arizona game, but I'm with you. Like the O-line, just so many questions here. It's really hard to want to plant my flag there, but I love the upside in tournaments. Like even more than Bagent, we know what Daniel Jones's upside is, and it's highest scoring quarterback on the slate. Like his upside is similar to Josh Allen. He's just going to do it 1 in every 10 games.
Right. Whereas Josh Allen's going to do it 5 in every 10 games. Like, it's unlikely to hit there, but he's shown it in the past. Hasn't really, I don't think he's gotten it done at all this year so far. And I think the Giants O-line was I think they had their best game last week, if I remember correctly, and now they're just banged up even more. So I don't know. It's a tough spot.
Washington's strength is their D-line. It's a tough spot.
It's a really tough spot. And I guess we'll get to the running backs talking about Saquon. Like I have two minds there with Saquon as well as like, well, maybe they just, throw it short over and over to Saquon, but I don't know. We'll get there when we talk about running backs a little bit. All right. And then Sam Howell, I mean, similarly, like Sam Howell, kind of a gunslinger out there against that Giants defense, which has been pretty bad so far this year.
Yeah.
Sam Howell not getting a ton of ownership either. I think that he and this is what I'm talking about. I think to me, Daniel Jones and Sam Howell stand out to me as like the cheap-ish quarterbacks
That's
that
fair.
I love that make it harder for me to want to get to the really cheap guys. But I feel like you laid out a good case for Tyson Badger. So he's maybe the one who's even cheaper that I will consider. I don't think I'm playing anybody else who's super cheap here. Do you have any interest in Sam Howell?
I do a little bit. Now, I could be totally wrong here, just as the last point on Tyson Badgett. I'm kind of playing into the unknown, just that I just think it's really hard to project him. I could be totally off. And the most likely outcome here is he gets like probably 11 DK points, which will suck. Then you're going to need like all the high guys to absolutely nut, which, you probably need that anyways. But if you play Badgett here, you really want like at least 17 in my mind. And that's no guarantee, but I just think there's upside, especially in this spot. Like he's not facing a good defense. He's still not getting love. He's at home. So that's my case there. I'm with you. Like I would rather get to Howell or Jones probably. They are a little bit more expensive. And I think this is such an interesting game, the Commanders Giants. I could see so many things happening here. The Giants finally looked okay on Sunday night against Buffalo. But like I said, they lost in the last second. Maybe they come out really deflated. Their season's more or less over because they're 1-5 or whatever. So who knows what team's going to show up. But on the other side, it's not like Washington's that good. So I think you could play both quarterbacks and both stacks in this game while also playing, not together, both defenses.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt Murphy says Daniel Jones is being projected as out. This is moot. Is that right? I thought the last update I had seen suggested that he was likely to play, but maybe I missed an update on Daniel Jones. That would obviously change things. If he is not playing, that changes the discussion of the Giants quarterback situation. All right, let's see. Any other quarterbacks that we want to talk? Somebody brought up Kenny Pickett. Interesting. So he's
on the wrong side of questionable. Sorry to cut you off, but Jones, it says, is on the wrong side of questionable. And in that case, I have no interest in Taylor. I like the Commanders defense less though, because Jones is a guy that's really turnover prone. True. Taylor is a pro quarterback. So kind of makes me like the Giants less while also liking the Commanders less. That said, the Giants O-line is so bad. I think the Commanders are still totally in play.
All right. Well, apologies for wasting everybody's time talking about Daniel Jones. Seemed like an interesting spot, but yeah, if he's not going to play, obviously we don't need to talk about Daniel Jones anymore. Somebody, I think Ansanian brought up Kenny Pickett, and I wanted to just throw it out and say no to Kenny Pickett, no Pat Fryermuth there, but he actually looks good in the boom bust tool, so I think he's at least worth bringing up. 6.6% projected ownership in the boom bust tool, 7.7% chance of being optimal against the Rams, and the Rams a really good offense that they're going to need to be trying to keep up with, and kind of a middling defense for the Rams. What do you think? Any interest in Kenny Pickett?
I don't think it's the worst play in the world. I like the unknown with Badgett more. Like we've seen who Kenny Pickett is, but he's certainly got more experience than Badgett. He's got better weapons. Like you said, the Rams are going to score here. Deontay Johnson's back. So you got Pickens and Johnson. You don't even have a Fryermuth to even, mess that up there. So I understand the Pickett play. It's just, I like Badgett and I think I like Howell more. Just because we've seen Pickett time and time again. He's not a good DFS quarterback. Doesn't mean that he can't run into a good game, but he's just not a good DFS quarterback. Yeah,
it's a little bit of a tough spot. The fact that we do have positive leverage makes me think worth at least considering, but he's not somebody that's standing out to me as like one of the plays that I want to play. We also didn't even talk about Josh Dobbs, who actually doesn't look great in the tools. I'm a little bit surprised he doesn't look better against that Seattle defense, but Josh Dobbs does not really stand out as a great play. I thought he would look better against the Seahawks defense. That's a little bit of a pass funnel, but the Cardinals have such a low implied team total. I don't think I'm going to play the last hurrah narrative before Kyler comes back with Josh Dobbs. I don't think I'm there. I think there's just other spots I like better. Do you agree?
Yeah, he's pretty much turned back into a pumpkin.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to talk about as far as quarterbacks go?
No, for me, I'd like to get up top. If not, I don't mind going all the way down, knowing that there are a bunch of good options in the mid tier as we outlined.
Yeah, absolutely. Lucky says, LOL Neil, Laffy's funny with his takes that don't concern DFS. I feel like, yeah, Laffy, like with anybody, Laffy could just do a show where we don't even talk about football the entire show. It's just like just shooting the shit. It's always fun too. Like I enjoy watching those shows, that aspect of it when they just get into really weird stuff. I enjoy being part of the conversation. I also enjoy just watching shows where the conversation is happening. So yeah, I don't have an issue with that. All right. As we mentioned at the top of the show, Rainmakers, DraftKings Rainmakers is the sponsor of this show. If you want to check out Rainmakers, you can start playing for free. Claim your free starter pack using the link in the description of this video or in chat. If you haven't already checked out Rainmakers, again, you can start playing for free. You get that pack. You're going to get a full lineup of cards that are, again, 100% free if you use that link, and you can use those to win real cash prizes. It's a once you have the card, you can use it going forward for eternity. Like it is your card. That's all you need to enter tournaments. The tournaments are free to enter once you have the cards on Rainmakers. If you're not familiar with the product on DraftKings, check it out. And again, the link is in the description of the video. It's also in chat right now. Should we move on and talk about some running backs, Belman?
Definitely.
All right, we are ready to talk about running backs. Let me sort by salary here so we can talk about the high end of the salary range. We've got Austin Eckler looking really interesting, 8,600 against that Chiefs defense. We have Saquon Barkley against the Commanders defense. We already talked about that a little bit. He's 8,100. We have Josh Jacobs against the Bears. He's 7,400. Bijan Robinson is 7,300. Kenneth Walker. Let's draw the line there. No, let's go one further down. Let's go to Aaron Jones, because I think he's an interesting part of the conversation. Let's talk about all of the running backs, 6,800 and higher. Anybody stand out to you as somebody you really love in the high end of pricing?
I love Austin Eckler here. He's expensive, as he should be. He wasn't great coming back against the Cowboys on Monday night, but Herbert was awful. Their offense kind of just fluttered the entire night. I really like Eckler in this spot. On any given slate, he's the guy with the highest upside at the running back position just because of his ability to catch passes. You know, if McCaffrey's on there, their upside is similar. I mean, I don't think that I would say McCaffrey's upside is all that much higher than Eckler's, though. I think they're like very similar. I like this game. I talked about it when we talked about quarterbacks. I like all the expensive weapons here, and Eckler is my favorite one. I think this is a competitive, high-scoring game. Eckler's going to catch a ton of balls, and he's been one of the best fantasy players over the past year. He hasn't played much this year. He was awesome in his first game, not so much last game. I like him a lot. I think Saquon is a really interesting pivot / just play on its own. He looked really good towards the end of that Buffalo game. He's a guy we know they're going to dump down to a ton. Don't necessarily love his chances to score unless he breaks a big play, but that's always possible with him. So I think both guys up top here are really interesting to me, especially in tournaments, which is what we're talking here, because neither of them are getting a ton of love. I get it. We'd like to spend down on running back. There's expensive receivers we like. You've got guys like Kenneth Walker and Josh Jacobs who are considerably cheaper. That just makes me like those top guys even more, specifically Eckler. That's part of the reason I don't mind paying down a quarterback.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So we had a similar thing, a few weeks back with Christian McCaffrey, where I was like, I didn't really get there as much as the field because he was so much more expensive than everybody else. And I was like, I think he needs to put up, 30 plus fantasy points to even hurt me a little bit at his price tag. And then in that spot, Christian McCaffrey had 4 touchdowns and put up like 50 fantasy points. Certainly Eckler, Barkley, these are guys that can put up huge scores, and they're not quite as expensive as McCaffrey was on that slate. 8,600 for Eckler, 8,100 for Barkley. It's interesting because we do have a lot of cheaper options that are getting ownership and that look like they're in great spots, but obviously nobody has quite the same likelihood of hitting a real upside as Eckler or Barkley. So it takes a little bit more for them to hurt you. I don't know that I'm going to get to a ton of Eckler and Barkley now after I've thought about it. It's just such a tough spot against that Commanders D line with the Giants O line for Barkley. You kind of be hoping for a lot of short passes, but I'm not sure if we can really expect it. So I don't think I'm going to get there too. Do you think you're going to get far over? We have Barkley projected for 7.4% ownership. Do you think you're going to get far over the field?
No, I mean, definitely
Okay.
not. First off, I'm probably playing 2 to 3 lineups in like the big milli maker. I don't even know if I'll use Barkley in any of them. If I do, it'd be once. Obviously when you're only making 3 lineups, you have to take a lot of stands because you're not going to be able to play a lot of players. Barkley is a guy I'm interested in, but at the end of the day, I like Eckler more, and he's also not getting ownership. So that's probably where I'm going to land.
Yeah. People in chat bringing up Baker Mayfield as a play. I don't think I'm going to get there. I understand why people want to talk about him. Because we've had multiple people bring up Baker Mayfield. We didn't really talk about him. He's not somebody that I think I'm going to play this week. Falcons are a little bit of a pass funnel defense, like 29th in terms of pass DVOA, 9th in rush DVOA. I don't know. I didn't bring him up because I don't really have any interest. Do you have any interest in Baker Mayfield?
No. Atlanta is also a team that likes to run a lot. Usually their game scripts are pretty slow. No, I mean, he's got good weapons to pair with. It wouldn't be the craziest thing if he played well, but not really. I think that if I were playing like a smaller slate, like the early only or whatever slate he's on, becomes more intriguing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, different types of contests, maybe he makes more sense, but I don't think
that's what I was thinking about with Pickett. Is like if you're playing the late slate. But then I also like Mahomes and Herbert. But still, like I think Pickett on the late slate works like Badgett does on the early slate.
Yep. All right. So we talked about the far high end. So getting back to running backs, I just want to interject there because we had enough people talking about it. But getting back to the running backs, we have Josh Jacobs against that Bears defense. We've got Bijan there, Kenneth Walker against the Cardinals defense, Aaron Jones against the Broncos defense that has just been atrocious. What do you think of these guys? The kind of like lower end of the high salary guys.
Well, these are the guys that are getting ownership, and it makes sense because they're in like just as good, if not better spots, probably better spots than the top guys. They're cheaper. They don't have the pass catching equity. At least Walker doesn't, that the top 2 guys do. But Seattle's a favorite here. I mentioned it when we talked about Geno Smith. Seattle's just too cheap for this spot, Walker included. He's coming in, projected to have a little bit of leverage. Makes him look even better. These are probably guys I'm not playing, not because like I don't like them, just because I'm getting to different price ranges, which is what spending down at quarterback or spending all the way up at quarterback does. Like if I decide to play a Herbert or Mahomes, I'm certainly not going to play those 2 running backs because I want weapons to pair with them. I'm not going to allocate my salary there. And if I'm not playing Mahomes, probably going to spend up. So they're kind of left behind for me. I'm making what I think is going to be a different type of build, which, in tournaments can sometimes be a great thing, oftentimes a bad thing.
And this is how you win $70,000 value tickets to the NFL Final Four for DraftKings, is getting contrarian, thinking a little bit different about the slate. If you're playing more than a few lineups, I think it makes a lot of sense to go to. I love Kenneth Walker at 7,000, 23.5% projected ownership. So like the ownership kind of reflects the spot for Kenneth Walker. We do have him with a 25% chance to be an optimal. So we have a little bit of positive leverage on Kenneth Walker. Like I'm going to get to probably right around the field on Kenneth Walker. If I had to guess, I would be over the field rather than under the field on Kenneth Walker. We'll see if we uncover some other more contrarian options that lead me away there. But as of right now, I think that I would probably be overweight to the field on Kenneth Walker. But I totally understand if you're playing 3 lineups and you're typically playing smaller field stuff where it's you're kind of playing more unique lineups. You have to make more concessions, players that you can't play everybody. Playing more lineups, I'm going to get to probably above weight to the field on Kenneth Walker. But I understand if you just like, I'm going to fade the immense chalk there on Walker. And then Aaron Jones, though, only getting 9% ownership. Do you have any interest in Aaron Jones against that Denver defense?
Yeah, definitely. I like him on his own. I also like him in that Jordan Love stack. He's the guy we saw in week 1, had a monster week 1. They're in a really good spot here. So I also like Aaron Jones. In tournaments, I think you could make the case that, he's even a better play than those top guys. Those top guys, as you mentioned, though, are just in a really, really good spot. So yeah, I like Aaron Jones here. I think he's the contrarian guy between that group. And yeah, I'm kind of mostly interested in I want to hear what you have to say about Jahmyr Gibbs here, honestly.
Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs, It's tough. So we've got David Montgomery out. The coach speak seems to suggest that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to get a good amount of work. I don't fully trust it, and I hate the spot against Baltimore. So if it were a different spot, I would be more willing to just say, okay, they're saying he's going to get, great work here. He's shown flashes of being talented, but I just don't know that like they really want to give Jahmyr Gibbs a full like bell cow kind of workload. So against a defense like the Ravens, who has just been great all year, I don't think I'm going to get to a ton of Jahmyr Gibbs. Might be a mistake because again, he looks like a dynamic, talented rookie out there, but I think in this spot against Baltimore, I'm probably fading Jahmyr Gibbs. What do you think? You going to get there?
We see this very much eye to eye. I'm probably not going to get there because I like the guys that are a little bit more expensive than him more. And I think there are guys cheaper than him that, offer similar type projection. That said, he's got massive upside if the coach speak is true with just dump offs and big plays, etc. We haven't seen him in this role yet. Yeah. I'm with you. It's a bad spot, and I don't believe that. Like, I'm not even going to be surprised if Craig Reynolds has more carries than him tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, at all. I would not be surprised at all. I think Craig Reynolds is questionable to play. Is that right? Let me see what the latest update is, but I think that there was some concern. So it would look a little bit different. Like if Craig Reynolds plays, like that really, really limits my interest in Jahmyr Gibbs. But if Craig Reynolds is out, then it becomes more of a conversation for me.
Same,
would it change things for you?
It would. I don't see how it couldn't change things at all because Craig Reynolds has been there for a while. They seem to trust him in like that third string running back role. If someone gets hurt, he gets bumped up. I think it would depend on who the next guy up is. Is it just some random guy that they've called up? Is it someone who's played there before that I don't mind giving carries to? But I don't think there's any doubt if he's out, have to boost Gibbs at least a little bit.
Right. Then you would feel more confident that he's going to get that kind of workhorse load. Yeah, it would be more interesting if Craig Reynolds is ultimately ruled out. At this point, like they just ruled out Marvin Jones for personal reasons, which I don't know. What does that mean? Does that just mean not catching the ball? Is that the personal reasons? I don't know. But Marvin Jones not playing. So they didn't come out at that point and say that Craig Reynolds is also out. So maybe he plays. We'll get more information. But yeah, he would be more interesting if Craig Reynolds is out. But we just at this point are unsure what's happening there. All right, man. I've interest in the Bills passing game. I don't know that I'm going to go to James Cook at 6,400. Jonathan Taylor, I do think that he's going to continue to see more and more of the workload for the Colts. So maybe this is a week that you could at least think about playing Jonathan Taylor, but he's playing against that Cleveland defense, like really stout defense, makes it hard to really want to go there. It's funny because you would see Jonathan Taylor 6,500. If you saw that in years past, that would look really good, but it's a tough spot. I still think Zach Moss is going to have a role here. So I don't think I'm going to go to either Taylor or Cook. I'm definitely not. I'm just going to continue not playing Zach Moss, and it has not gone well for me so far, not playing Zach Moss. But then we get down to the uber chalk in Isaiah Pacheco, 21% projected ownership. Makes sense against that Chargers defense. Still a little bit of a run funnel, although they're just kind of bad in general this year. They've been bad against the pass as well. So let's talk about Pacheco, or if you have more interest than I do in any of the other guys I mentioned, you could talk about them too. But what is your level of interest in Pacheco here?
Well, first, I think you said it best with Taylor. Like his price tag jumps out a little bit. And I'll say if PJ Walker is starting, I don't think Taylor's the craziest play in the world because PJ Walker stinks. Like he's not an NFL quarterback. So the Colts are going to have the ball a lot. That said, I'm just not really looking to pick guys against this Browns defense if I don't have to. So that's where I stand there. We see that similarly. As far as Pacheco goes, it's a tough one, man. Like he's too cheap. Kansas City's obviously got a really good offense. The one thing I'm unsure about with him is he's usually been very touchdown dependent. Like if he doesn't score, he's a guy that you don't really want. He's been more involved with the passing game this year, caught 6 balls last time out. Obviously that was his high. I understand why he's getting a lot of love. I don't think he's a must play because I don't think anyone on an NFL slate is really a must play, but I understand the ownership just because he fits so nicely. Like his price is cheap for what he offers. He's been in double digits in 4 straight games, which people look at. So I get it at that price. In a game the Chiefs are favored by 5.5, 6. It makes sense. He's not like an ultimate priority for me. As I mentioned, I like Eckler a lot. And I already said I like Deontay Foreman a lot. So those are my 2 favorite running backs on the slate. One really high guy, one cheap guy. Price considered though, like if I were playing a cash game, I don't think there's any way I'd get off Pacheco.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he looks great for cash purposes. At least interesting for GPPs. A little bit more involved in the passing game this year than he was last year, so that's kind of fun to see that Pacheco's role expanded a little bit. Didn't necessarily anticipate that.
Are we sure that's going to stay that way? That's my question.
No, I mean we're obviously not sure, but it's at least they know what they have. But they know what they have in Jerick McKinnon. Like Jerick McKinnon has been the passing game back, and they've gone away from it for whatever reason. Like after we saw it work really well late last year, they've really gone away from Jerick McKinnon as just the passing down back. Like they have worked in Pacheco more. So I kind of think that it's probably here to stay. But yeah, obviously no guarantees that he's going to continue to see more targets this year than he had in the past. Man, it's already 12:47. Time flies when we're doing the show, Belman. So let's talk about some of the cheaper running backs. And I know you're your guy. You're a big Cleveland Browns fan. Jerome Ford looks good here. We've got him projected for 17% ownership. He's just 5,100 as the now presumably the lead back. I know Kareem Hunt a little bit involved as well. So first of all,
they also called up Deion Jackson today.
So break down your Browns backfield. Do you have interest in any of these Browns running backs?
Definitely Ford. I wasn't expecting our tools to like him as much as they do. Our tools really like him. They have him as the third running back behind, Walker and Jacobs. Makes sense. Browns are favorite here on the road. I like Ford more if Watson plays. Just like I said about Barkley, very encouraged with how Ford looked towards the end of that San Francisco game. He had struggled from the majority of that contest, but really, broke loose on that last drive, allowed the Browns to win that game. Encouraging. He's too cheap. He hasn't been amazing from a fantasy perspective outside of that really long run in Pittsburgh. And he had a receiving TD against Tennessee. If Kareem Hunt plays and with Deion Jackson there, I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical of Ford. He's cheap enough where I think you can play him no matter what, but I like Foreman more.
All right, so let's talk about Foreman. Foreman is just 4,800. Roschon Johnson already ruled out for this game. Khalil Herbert I think he's on the IR. He's at least out for this game. D'Onta Foreman, 4,800, probably going to be the bell cow once again for the Bears. And as you laid out earlier, great spot against the Raiders here. So is there anything more that we really need to say? We've got Foreman at just 11% ownership here. How much interest? How much are you going to be playing D'Onta Foreman in your three lineups? I know I guess you can't really answer that. How much would you play in a 150 set?
A lot. I'd be over the field. So for me, this is a case where he's not getting a ton of love for two reasons. One, people like the Raiders in this game. They're only 2.5-point favorites, but all I've heard all week is Raiders. So people think the Bears are going to be needing to pass here. I don't see it that way. I like the Bears offense in this game. I think the Raiders stink. Going east from a 10 o'clock home start for them, 10 a.m., and the head start for them, if you will. The only thing I'm worried about with Foreman here is Darrington Evans, because Foreman was not the bell cow last week until the second half. That said, he was the bell cow really in the second half. Caught a ball, ended with a decent rushing score, 15 attempts. This is a guy that's been good the past 2 years. Evans was not impressive. I'm willing to roll the dice on Foreman. I mean, it's not like it's that much worse of a situation than Jerome Ford is in with a couple other backs. I mean, you're usually not going to get backs this cheap that it's they're bell cows. They're the only guy there. I think even if that's not the case with Foreman, he's getting the majority of the touches here. I mean, you pair Badgett with Foreman, it's 9,700, under 10K for two guys. In an offense, I think is going to be able to move the ball. And I like the possibility of him dumping down to Foreman.
Yeah, it's at least, I think, promising that Foreman did seem to, for whatever reason, and I can't really make sense of it, but after Justin Fields went out, Foreman took on more of that bell cow role last week, which I don't know what the reason is there. Maybe he just looked better and they decided, let's give it to the guy who's been looking better than Darrington Evans, but definitely a concern with Darrington Evans there that he was pretty involved in the first half. But I still think, regardless, I think Foreman going to get enough usage here. And also, I think that does, you're talking about everybody liking the Raiders defense. If they're going to be running the ball more, which would make sense to me that they're just going to run the ball more, that's not going to help the Raiders defense. With the defense, you're not just trying to, hope that the other team doesn't score. You're also hoping for a pick six or, some kind of a touchdown. And that's tougher when the other team is running all the time. But we don't need to talk too much about defenses now, but yeah, Foreman looks great at 4,800, 11% ownership currently. Who knows if that is going to change? Any other running backs that stand out to you as great plays?
Not really. I think Ford and Foreman are priced cheap enough where like those are the guys I'm looking at down there, especially with Pacheco, only 6,100. At the beginning of the week, I was contemplating Zach Evans. Can't do it. I mean, with Darrell Henderson, Myles Gaskin, Royce Freeman, all potentially there, I have zero interest in the Rams running back committee.
Yep.
One of them might be good, but I'm not going to be playing them.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. It's tough because like the Rams running back situation has been so good. Like if there is a bell cow there, right, they could easily like put up a lot of fantasy ones. Like we've seen, I don't think Kyren Williams is any kind of special talent, and he's been absolutely crushing. So it's tough for me because I really want to fully fade this Rams backfield because it is so gross. We really have no idea who's going to play. We'll have to see what the ownership comes in at Darrell Henderson tomorrow. I don't think
that's a great point though, because usually you talk about spots like this is you need not only the guy to play, but also the guy to play well. Well, yeah. The guy's in a spot to play well though, and they're not going to get ownership. So I really like that point. If I were making 150, maybe I'd decide like I'm going to play Evans, like 5% Evans or whatever it is, and be over the field on one of the guys and just try to call my shot there.
Yeah, it's tough because like it's so hard to predict who is going to be the guy. Like I think Sean McVay intentionally being vague about like who is going to be the running back. A lot of people trying to interpret what he says. Like he said, Zach Evans still learning, which makes me think that Zach Evans is not going to be the guy, but also like he has no incentive to tell us what he's actually thinking here. So if you can nail the guy and they end up being the bell cow, which maybe they will be, maybe they'll put somebody just straight up into the Kyren Williams role. It's just so tough to know who the guy is going to be, but there is potential that one of, Royce Freeman, Darrell Henderson ends up being the bell cow, and you don't need to be particularly good as we've seen with Kyren Williams. Like he's kind of, I think kind of like a middling NFL running back. If one of these guys can just, step in and be that replacement level value for Kyren Williams, they're going to be in a great spot. So yeah, my inclination, people were talking about in chat earlier today. My first instinct was, no, I'm not going to play any of those Rams guys. I have no idea how to predict who it's going to be, but there is a case to be made. If they're going to be low owned because of how murky it is and they're stepping into that spot, I can see a case to play them. And then the one other name that I'll throw out there is Brian Robinson. Nice spot against that Giants defense in a spot where they could play with the lead there, and Brian Robinson more likely to play in game script where they have the lead. So I think maybe a little bit of interest in Brian Robinson. Talked about Jaleel McLaughlin as somebody who.
One more guy I forgot to mention that I actually like quite a bit.
Let's hear it.
Jaylen Warren. So
really? Okay.
Yeah. So this is a guy I think he's just better than Najee Harris. I know that doesn't matter if I say that. It matters what Tomlin thinks. We've seen him more involved the past 2 weeks. Now coming out of their bye, I think we see even more of him. He's a guy that we know they get involved in the passing game. The Rams are going to score here, as we talked about earlier with Pickett. I really like Jaylen Warren as a contrarian, pivot off of Ford and Foreman, or to play with them and just spend down at running backs. He's a perfect PPR guy. He's not going to play a ton of snaps, for what you normally want, but he's really explosive in those snaps and they get him the ball.
Okay. I like that. And then I'll also call out one of like against that Packers run defense that's been pretty bad. You could play Javonte Williams. I also have some interest in Jaleel McLaughlin, who I think is just kind of an electric back out there, like at 5,000, even with splitting carries, maybe 40% of the workload. I think against this Packers defense, Jaleel McLaughlin at least a little bit interesting at. We have him at 2.5% ownership. So those are the final two names that I'll throw out there. We're almost to the end of the shows, and we still need to talk about wide receivers and tight ends. So I'll give it to you one more time. Any other running backs you want to throw out there?
Definitely no other running backs I want to talk over. Are we like stopping at 2, or can we go over a little bit?
We'll go a little bit over. We were supposed to stop if you're okay with that. I mean, we
no, totally fine. I would love to. So I was just going to make one quick side note. I can always get on board with Jaleel McLaughlin. He actually went to Notre Dame, not that Notre Dame though, Notre Dame College in South Euclid, Ohio, about 15 minutes away from me.
Nice. I didn't realize that. That's awesome. Yeah. So yeah, definitely an interesting play there. All right, we will talk about some wide receivers. Before we do, I just want to mention real quickly, you can zone out for a minute here if you don't live in one of these states. So if you live in these particular states, you should pay attention to anybody else you can zone out. So Kentucky, Ohio, New Jersey, Virginia, Iowa, Colorado. If you live in one of those states, you should listen up. Fantastic deal from Bet365. In only those states, you can bet $5. You're going to get $150 in bonus bets. Just an awesome deal there. $5 for $150 in bonus bets. Only available in those states, unfortunately. The rest of us can just be a little bit jealous. But yeah, Kentucky, Ohio, New Jersey, Virginia, Iowa, Colorado. Go sign up at Bet365. Use the link in the description of this video or in chat when you sign up. You have to be 21 plus in most places. Only 18 in Kentucky, though, to gamble. And if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Bet365. Use the link in the description of this video when you sign up. All right, let's talk about some wide receivers here. And we'll start at the high end in terms of salary. We got Cooper Kupp up in the high end, Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen. Devontae Adams is somebody that a lot of people have talked about. Going to have Brian Hoyer throwing on the ball. Definite squeaky wheel narrative with Devontae Adams this week. His goal is greatness. It's not wins. It is greatness. We got Amon-Ra St. Brown against the Ravens. Let's draw the line at Puka Nacua is 7,600. Let's talk about all of the wide receivers. Puka Nacua up to his teammate Cooper Kupp. Who do you have the most interest in here?
I'll start at the bottom of that group. So first I'll talk about Puka Nacua. I like your call that he's like a contrarian option. I just can't get there at this price point. He's so close to the other guys that I like more. I understand it. It's just not for me. Feel the same way about Amon-Ra St. Brown. I love the Sun God. Just not really looking to play much Detroit and Baltimore here. And he's also really expensive. So then we get to the big one, Devontae Adams. Like, I have heard so much Devontae Adams talk this week. He's priced really cheap at 8,200. It's a good spot against the Bears. We obviously know he's been talking a ton this week about just wanting the ball more. He's still got Brian Hoyer throwing him the ball, though. And he's received 5 targets in each of the past 2 weeks. Like, yeah, he'll probably get more than that here, but they've won these games. Like, I'm just like, I like Adams here because I always like Adams. He's too cheap. He's one of the best wide receivers ever. I just think the ownership is going to really, really follow him here. And I'm not sure it's warranted. Like, all that stuff that we're talking about is noise. Like, sure, he could have a really big game, but it's not because he was talking this week. It's because he's really freaking good. So I don't like him anymore. I like him a little bit less because the ownership's there. Keenan Allen's a guy I like a lot here. He's too expensive. So this is one where I think about what you said earlier about like when guys are this expensive, you need like a 30 from him here. I don't love Keenan Allen on his own, but I love him like in this game script. Like if you're playing pieces from this game, I think it's only natural to like Keenan Allen because he gets the ball a ton. And yeah, while you love 30 points here, if he gets you 25, I think you're more than fine, depending on what other guys do. I love the Diggs call, pairing him with Josh Allen, as you talked about earlier. He's crushed New England the multiple times they faced them. He's got 20 plus DK points in every game this year, but one. He's really expensive, and it is a tougher spot in New England, but I love the idea of getting there from a contrarian perspective. And then you've got like Mr. Reliable Cooper Kupp, projects as the top receiver on the slate. He's been the best wideout in fantasy football now when he's healthy for the past couple of years. He's even more expensive, like 1,000 more than the Keenan Allen, Devontae Adams is of the world. So you really need a big game from him, but it's Cooper freaking Kupp. So wide receivers loaded. I think you can make a real strong case for the top 3 guys, and then people want to make it, the top 4 guys, just because it's still Devontae Adams.
Yeah. All right. So the only place where I'm going to disagree somewhat is Puka Nacua. I do have a lot of interest in Puka. Of course, you're only playing 3 lineups. I might not necessarily get there in 3 lineups either. I will say Puka Nacua, for anybody who's curious, like how things are going with Cooper Kupp returning, led the team in route participation last week, 93% route participation. Cooper Kupp actually second at 82% last week. In terms of target share, he was second on the team, 29% target share. That is pretty elite for Puka Nacua still last week. Cooper Kupp, of course, had 37.5%. So definitely like takes a back seat to Cooper Kupp, I think, but still, I think like he's going to have those weeks where he spikes. So I think I have more interest in Puka Nacua than you do. We have some positive leverage there, 10% ownership, 12.5% chance of being optimal for Puka. So I think I like him just a little bit better than you do. But otherwise, I think you did a good job of kind of laying out the rest of the slate here. Devontae Adams we're only projecting for sub 16% ownership. I think that your analysis there maybe suggests that there's potential that he's going to get a little bit more ownership because of all the narratives going on, everybody talking about him. So that's one of those things.
I'm taking the over on 20%.
Over on 20%, and we've got him at sub 16%. So you're going well over what we have. And that's the thing, like ownership projections can't always account for like narratives, like what's being talked about. It's a little bit hard to account for that kind of stuff. So yeah, if he gets over 20% ownership, suddenly does not look like a great play. But man, against that Bears
and also
defense,
like the stat, like we're pretty much all numbers and tools, right? Not all sites like that are not all sites out there are like that. All it takes is one or two of them like pumping Devontae Adams hard. It pumps up his ownership. That's not even needed. I just personally think his ownership is going to be a little bit higher than projections show. We'll see if that's the case.
Chris Oster says Yoniel Tutu is the second guy. Pitt plays tons of man-to-man. Puka better versus zone. Yeah, it's an interesting note. I think Tutu is in play also, so I'm not disagreeing there. I still think you can play Puka against any defense, but yeah, worth interesting note there. All right, and Diggs, yeah, we talked about him with Allen. Definitely gonna have some Allen with Diggs pairings for me this week. I really like that stack. Let's move down. Let's open it up more. So let's because we're already over time, I'm just gonna open up to who are some of your favorite wide receivers on the slate.
So I like the guys up top. Only naturally, those are the best wide receivers in football.
Yep.
I think the other guys that I'm starting to really look at are in like the 5 to 6K range, specifically Christian Watson, who we talked about, a little bit with Jordan Love. And then I hate to do it, but Jerry Jeudy. Green Bay really struggles against the slot. He's due for a big game. He's been awful this year. Just ask Steve Smith. But we know the upside's there. He's proven it time and time again in the past. Well, not time and time again. He's proven it in the past. So he's a guy I'm interested in, not necessarily like going to play him, but I like him. And then really where I'm honing in on is 4,800 and 4,700 Josh Palmer and Rashee Rice. So we've just seen Rice start to reestablish him as Mahomes' favorite weapon outside of Kelsey. I think that's only going to continue. Stud in college, et cetera, et cetera. And then Josh Palmer, he looked good last week. Got a touchdown called back. Still ended up with double-digit fantasy points. He's, one of the cheaper pass catchers that I really like in this game. He seems to be the third option outside of Keenan Allen and Eckler. So those are two guys I'm looking at hard. And then after that, we talked about the Seattle guys. Got to bring up Wan'Dale Robinson at 3,800.
Yeah, that's a good call out on Wan'Dale Robinson. Man, Rashee Rice, I thought like he had been kind of moving up. Only 39% route participation last week is at least worth noting. Like I thought he would continue moving up. It's not always linear with rookies. Like maybe he jumps back.
That was a weird game.
It was a weird game. That's true. He did have 4 targets in that game, so a little bit involved. Kadarius Toney, who like stood out as getting looks. He had 5 targets in the game. Also, only 28% route participation. It's tough with these Chiefs in general.
Kind of hoping that the Chiefs do what the Giants have done and shorten their rotation. And if and when they do that, Rice will be in there. Like, there's no way he won't be. You
think Mecole Hardman's going to play this week, right?
Probably, but how much? Yeah, he's in the player pool, 3,200.
Okay, yeah. So just it's a murky situation there. But as you said earlier in the show, the Giants getting a little bit more condensed. They seem to be figuring out what they want to do here. We've got Darius Slayton had 88.6% route participation last week. Jalen Hyatt up to 75%. Love to see that for the rookie. Darren Waller 73%. Wan'Dale Robinson 66%. So love to see that. Makes I would say Slayton, Hyatt, and Robinson among the wide receivers all somewhat viable, I think, for the Giants. So they all look kind of interesting. I'd throw out Terry McLaurin against that Giants defense stands out as somebody who could be interesting. No idea what they're doing with Jahan Dotson. Like, is he really just going to be a holder? I don't think he is. But Terry McLaurin at the very least looks interesting. Tyler Lockett looks good regardless of whether DK Metcalf is in there. I'd say actually JSN at 6.4% projected ownership. That'll probably go up. It will go up if DK Metcalf is ultimately ruled out, but he's going to look good at 3,900 against that Arizona defense. JSN is going to stand out as a great value play, particularly if DK Metcalf is out. Jacoby Myers, like we talked about some of the reasons to like Devontae Adams. A lot of them apply to Jacoby Myers also. Just has a huge target share on this team. We've got him projected for 10% ownership. Given his role on the team against this Bears defense, like that actually is a little bit underowned. We have 12% chance of Jacoby Myers being optimal. So there's another name to throw out there. Let's see if there's anybody.
I got one more for you.
All right, let's hear it.
This actually works with you. Deontay Hardy, 3K.
Yes.
I mean, listen, he's 3K. It's not like he's been amazing this year, but he's involved in every single game. He scored a touchdown last week. And it's not a showdown slate, but still, if he scores a touchdown and gets you 10 points here at 3K with how expensive other guys on the slate are, sure.
Yeah, I think you could play him. I don't think I would play him too much outside of Bill's stack necessarily.
Same.
I don't know. Gabe Davis actually, as long as we're talking about these kind of secondary Bills receivers, Gabe Davis, let me see what the ownership is at now. Because earlier in the week, we had Gabe Davis like sub 2% ownership, and that like he's been more consistent this year. He's actually been really good this season. We have Gabe Davis at like virtually zero ownership right now. So at 5,900, Gabe, he's not going to come at 0% ownership. It's going to be over 1%, I'm pretty sure. But regardless, 5,900 Gabe Davis.
Yeah.
If we're playing some Bill stacks, that is intriguing for me to say the least. We are over time, so we can't really get too deep into any of these other plays. And anybody else that you want to throw out?
No, I thought we'd pivot over to tight ends because I know that you want to speed things up a little bit. So just as far as tight end goes, for me, Kelsey's the top guy. He always is. He's one of the best patch catchers in football at tight end. So that you just get that as is. Then Mark Andrews, we talked about a little bit, looks really, really good. Detroit is not good against tight ends. He's cheap at 5,700. So those are two guys up top I'm really looking at. Talked about Luke Musgrave at 3,300. He's just too cheap for his involvement in this offense. And then two cheap guys I like, and interested to hear your opinion on these guys. Michael Mayer, for the Raiders at 2,700 has been more involved lately. Our tools don't love him, but again, he's 2,700. And then Trey McBride, another guy who's seen more involvement lately. So for me, I think it's Kelsey. Don't mind if you have to drop down to Andrews, but then after that, I'm looking to spend down here. How about you?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think those are both great calls. Those guys that like just might seem to be taking on bigger roles. Who knows if it sticks? Like as we said, It's not always linear. But Michael Mayer, he took on a much bigger role in the most recent game. Great matchup with the Bears, 2,700. Yeah, can definitely pique my interest in Michael Mayer. Trey McBride, as you said, like just seemed to flip in the most recent game. He flipped Zach Ertz. So Trey McBride, 2,600, sub 1% ownership against that Seattle passing defense too. Like not they're kind of a pass funnel defense. Yeah, makes a lot of sense to play some Trey McBride. I do think like from the mid range, Darren Waller, we talked about how things are kind of condensing in New York. Darren Waller, also a guy like if they don't have time to throw, theoretically, you would think that they would throw to Darren Waller. Now, part of the problem is they've been using him as more of a blocker because their offensive line has been so banged up. So not necessarily going to work out that way, but he's 5,000 and, had like 75% route participation. So I do think in the mid range, Darren Waller is at least interesting. Cole Kmet, if you're playing Tyson Bagent, I could see going to Cole Kmet also 4,200, 4% projected ownership, 4% chance to be an optimal. Sort of interesting there. Did you talk about Luke Musgrave?
Yeah, talked about Musgrave. He just kind of stands out at that price. Like he's a rookie, so like you said, not everything's linear, but he's involved a lot. Only expect that more coming off the bye. So he looks like one of the best dollar per dollar plays on the slate, probably.
Yep, absolutely. And he's just 3,300, super cheap. So lot to be said for Luke Musgrave. He is getting ownership, 15% projected ownership, 16% chance to be an optimal though. So he's at least worth considering. Trying to see if there's anybody else that we have positive leverage on Tyler Higbee, 5% ownership, 6% chance to be an optimal. So I guess you could consider playing him. Jonnu, actually, we got some nice positive leverage, 3% projected ownership for Jonnu Smith, 5% chance to be an optimal. That's a little bit interesting to me. Dawson Knox, I haven't seen what the latest status is on Dalton.
I think he's going to play.
Kincaid's going to play.
Yeah.
So maybe you can mix and match your Buffalo tight ends. I think you can make a case for either Kincaid or Dawson Knox, both pretty cheap if you're playing a Bill stack.
I'll finally call out a Browns player here. David Njoku. Yes. Cheap at 3,400. Had a touchdown and another long catch called back last week. That was with PJ Walker. They've talked a lot about wanting to get him more involved. And obviously I listened to a lot of local Brown stuff. So they like Njoku a lot, and he's cheap enough at 3,400 where if he scores a touchdown, everything else is gravy.
Yeah, it looks great in the tools too. Like 6% projected ownership, 7.5% chance to be an optimal. That is definitely a good call out. I thought I had somebody else that just came to my head, and now it is escaping me. There was somebody that I thought I wanted to bring up, but
any interest in the Pittsburgh guys? Was it one of the Pittsburgh guys?
No, it wasn't Darnell Washington. Yeah, because we have Freiermuth out. I guess you consider like Darnell Washington. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to go there. Or Connor Hayward, I guess the other one, getting 4% ownership. I don't think I'm going to go there. Do you think you're going to go there?
Probably not. Maybe the other guy you were thinking about is Cade Otton, who looks really good in our tools. No.
Okay. No, maybe it wasn't even a tight end. Maybe I'm just maybe there was another position. I don't know. I'm blanking on any other tight ends that I wanted to talk about. But I think we've done a good enough job talking about all of the tight ends. Maybe it was somebody in chat. Did somebody say something?
Andrews looks great for our tools.
Yeah.
We talked about him a little bit, but he's the third highest leverage player on the slate. So, that alone in a good spot against Detroit, as we talked about, I don't mind that one bit if you can't get up to Kelsey.
Oh, we have an NHL show, so we do need to get out of here pretty quickly.
Okay.
We have a couple minutes, Richard. I didn't realize. Sorry about that, Richard. I didn't realize that we had an NHL show. I thought we were nothing on the book, and that is my bad. So we're gonna need to get out of here. But let's talk about top stacks here, Belman. Who do you like? Is actually before we get to top stacks, I do want to just give a quick shout out to the lineup generator. We're not going to look at the lineup generator here. Okay, Jacob is here. But I am putting out videos. So if you want to see the lineup generator, check those out on this channel. I'm putting out some VODs there. All right, we are ready to do top stacks here. You're going to, one or two stacks, Belman. Who are your favorite stacks on this slate?
My favorite stacks on this slate are going to be, it's Kansas City and the Chargers. I know that's probably a chalky-ish take, but there's so many ways to get different in football. And as we've talked about a lot, and I know you talked a lot about, it's not the ownership of one player that matters. It's the ownership of your entire lineup. So not too worried about that. I think those are the two best stacks, on the board here. And then you can make cases based on price for the Rams and the Packers and other ones that look good here.
Yep. All right. Good call there. And I'm going to go with the Bills. I talk about how much I like Josh Allen, Diggs, just going expensive with my stack. I really like the Allen to Diggs stack. And I also think you can consider switching up, doing Allen to Gabe Davis, or, as you said, Deontay Hardy's sort of in play, the tight end sort of in play, but primarily I'm just going to Allen Diggs. I think it makes a lot of sense in this spot. All right. Any final words, Belman?
No, great show. Sorry I talked so much that we ended up going so far over, but I just couldn't contain my excitement.
It's a me problem. Honestly, I have trouble keeping shows within range because I like talking about all the different plays here. So it's not your fault, Belman. It is my fault, but we are going to turn it over to the hockey show. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you haven't already hit the like button, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Good luck this weekend.